I thought our life was perfect. A beautiful home, a loving husband, and a future we dreamed about together. But sometimes, the people we trust the most hide secrets so dark they can unravel everything, including your own sense of reality. This is a story about how the truth, when it finally surfaces, doesn't just break a marriage, it breaks a soul. If you've ever wondered how betrayal can feel like drowning in plain sight, this story will reach you deep inside. Part 1. Cracks in the Mirror. When we met, it felt like fate had stitched our souls together. James was everything I'd ever hoped for: kind, ambitious, endlessly patient with my anxieties and dreams. We moved quickly, falling into a rhythm that felt natural, effortless even. Our small apartment filled with laughter and whispered promises. It was like living inside a warm, unshakable bubble where nothing could hurt us. I wasn't naive. I'd seen the divorce and heartbreaks around me, knew all too well how fragile relationships could be. But with James, I was certain. We had a foundation built on honesty, or so I thought. 3 years later, we bought a house in the suburbs. The perfect white picket fence, blooming garden, and quiet streets felt like a dream come true. We talked about kids, vacations, and growing old together. I was already imagining a lifetime of Sunday mornings wrapped in his arms, coffee brewing, and shared smiles. But cracks appeared slowly. Little things first. James stopped calling when he said he would. His eyes sometimes glazed over when I asked about his day. The phone would buzz silently in his pocket, and when I glanced over, his expression would tighten like he'd been caught in a lie. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking. That work stress was taking a toll. I held on to the moments he smiled at me like I was the only woman in the world. But deep inside, a seed of doubt was growing, small, but insistent. One night, I came home early from a work event, hoping to surprise him with dinner and maybe a movie. The house was quiet, too quiet. I found his phone on the kitchen counter, face down, the screen glowing with a new message notification. Curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the best of me. I picked it up and hesitated, heart pounding in my chest. The message was from a woman named Lena. It read, "Can we meet tomorrow? I need to see you." A cold wave washed over me. I shoved the phone back down, my hands trembling. I wanted to scream, to run, to collapse, but I stayed frozen in place, numb and broken in a way I hadn't known was possible. 4 days. I kept searching for signs, proof, anything to confirm what my gut screamed was true. James became distant, evasive. The love that once felt so safe started slipping through my fingers like sand. When I finally confronted him, the cracks shattered into pieces I never thought I'd be strong enough to pick up. The confession wasn't dramatic or explosive, it was a quiet, painful unraveling of everything I believed. He'd been seeing Lena for months. He said it started when work became overwhelming, when he felt like he was losing himself. He swore it wasn't about me, but about his own emptiness. The betrayal wasn't just in the affair. It was the way my world tilted on its axis. The way every memory became a question mark, every promise a lie. How could the man I loved and trusted most choose someone else while still lying next to me every night? This story isn't just about betrayal, it's about the slow, suffocating collapse of trust, the desperate search for answers in the wreckage, and the hardest decision of all, whether to fight for a love that might be beyond saving or to find the courage to walk away. If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath you because someone you loved chose to betray you, this story will speak to the very core of your soul. Part 2. The Lie I Lived In. The morning after James confessed, the sun rose like it always did. Birds chirped, the coffee maker sputtered to life on its timer, and our neighborhood began its quiet routine. But for me, nothing was the same. I stood in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a steaming mug I couldn't drink, staring at the man I no longer recognized. He sat across from me, silent, eyes rimmed red. He looked human, flawed, weak. I wanted to scream, to throw the mug at the wall and watch it shatter, like he'd shattered me. But instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Why her? James flinched like the words were knives. It wasn't supposed to happen. They never are, I thought. He went on, explaining things I didn't want to hear. Lena worked with him. She was smart, funny, a good listener. You were so busy, he said, with work, with your charity stuff, with everything. So it was my fault now? I didn't scream. I didn't throw the mug. I nodded, like I understood. But inside, I was burning alive. I walked out of the house, barefoot, keys in my hand, not even sure where I was going. I drove until the roads blurred and my tears streaked the windshield. I ended up at my mother's house, knocking on her door like I was 16 again and needed saving from a bad date. She opened the door, took one look at me, and said nothing, just pulled me into her arms, and for the first time since the truth came out, I sobbed. When I told her, her face tightened. "You don't have to stay," she said simply. "You don't owe him anything." But I wasn't sure what I owed yet, to him, to myself, to the years we spent building this life. The days that followed were a blur. We agreed on space, but space inside a shared home is a prison. Every drawer I opened held a memory. Every room whispered lies I hadn't heard before. I couldn't even look at our wedding photo without feeling nauseous. I began sleeping in the guest room, the same guest room that had been spotless until now, like it was waiting for this exact moment. He tried, in his way. He left notes on the mirror, made me breakfast, texted me things like, "Please let me fix this." But every word felt like glue on a broken plate, trying to hold together something already in pieces. And then I did something I still don't fully understand. I reached out to Lena. I found her on Instagram. Her profile was private, but her photo was there. Blonde, stylish, confident. I stared at her face for what felt like hours. Then I messaged her. "You don't know me, but I think you know my husband." The response came 4 hours later. "I do. I'm so sorry." She didn't deny it, didn't lie. That should have made me hate her more. But strangely, it didn't. It made me realize she had no obligation to me. The betrayal was his, she was just the mirror that reflected who he really was when I wasn't looking. We talked, more than once. She told me things I hadn't known. That he said we were on a break. That he claimed we'd grown apart. That she ended it weeks ago, when she found out the truth. I couldn't tell if I was grateful or more broken than ever. The worst part wasn't the affair. It was realizing how little I knew the man I married. And worse, how little I'd allowed myself to see. I began to retrace everything. The late nights, the cold kisses, the times he flinched when I said "I love you." They were all clues. I just hadn't wanted to connect them. I'd wanted the fairy tale, the happily ever after. And in doing so, I chose blindness over truth. One night, I woke up to find him sitting on the floor outside the guest room, head in his hands. He looked up at me, pleading. "I'll do anything," he said. "Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Please, don't give up on us." And I stood there, heart pounding, with two choices in front of me. Stay, and maybe live in the shadow of what we used to be. Or go, and face the terrifying unknown of life without him. I hadn't made my decision yet, but for the first time, I realized something powerful. Even if I was broken, I wasn't weak. I could still choose. Part 3. When silence speaks louder than apologies. In the days that followed his confession, our home turned into a silent battleground. The tension between us wasn't loud. There were no shouting matches, no broken plates, no slammed doors. It was quieter than that, and somehow, even more devastating. It was the absence of touch, the long silences over dinner, the way we slept on opposite ends of the house as if haunted by invisible ghosts. Every corner held a memory I couldn't unsee. The living room, where we used to cuddle up with wine and talk about our future, now felt like a stage set from a play I no longer believed in. Our bedroom was the hardest. I couldn't even enter it without my stomach knotting. That bed had once been sacred, a place for love, for dreams, for whispered secrets. Now it was tainted. Every creak of the mattress echoed with betrayal. James tried. I'll give him that. He came home early. He made dinner, my favorite meals. He put on the music we used to slow dance to in the kitchen. But every gesture felt scripted, desperate, too little, too late. One evening, he handed me a letter, a real one, on paper, sealed like we were in high school again. I wrote everything down, he said quietly, in case I can't find the words. I opened it after he went to bed. His handwriting was familiar, but the words felt like they belonged to someone else, someone who was sorry, yes, but also scared. He confessed to feeling unseen, like a supporting actor in the movie of our life. Said the affair was a mistake, not love, that he wanted to feel wanted, and Lena had given him that. But he never stopped loving me. I wish I could say the letter moved me, that it stirred something soft inside, But all it did was confirm what I already knew. He had been unhappy. And instead of facing that with me, his wife, he ran. And then there was Lena. Our messages had turned into conversations. Tentative at first. Then surprisingly honest. She told me she hadn't known about me at first. That he talked about our marriage like it was already over. That she felt sick when she found out the truth, not just because of what she'd done, but because she saw in me the kind of woman she hoped to be someday. I didn't know whether to be flattered or furious. "You didn't deserve it," she wrote. Neither of us did. I couldn't help but ask her the question that kept me up at night. "Did he ever say he loved you?" She answered instantly. "No. He said he was confused, lonely, but never that he loved me." It was a strange kind of relief. Not enough to heal me, but enough to keep me from spiraling into the black hole of self-doubt. Because if he didn't love her, then maybe this wasn't about her being better, prettier, more exciting. Maybe it was about him being weak. I started going on long walks, miles and miles, until my legs ached and my lungs burned. I needed to feel something physical, a pain that made sense. Sometimes I ended up at the park bench where James and I used to sit on Sunday mornings. I'd watch couples walk by, smiling, holding hands, and wonder which of them were pretending. I found an old journal in the back of my closet, one I hadn't touched in years. I started writing again, not about him, about me, about the girl I used to be before marriage, before heartbreak. I remembered her, ambitious, curious, full of life. Somewhere along the way, I'd buried her beneath the title of wife. I was starting to dig her out. Then came the night everything cracked open again. I was in the kitchen when James walked in with an envelope in his hand. He looked nervous. "It's from a lawyer," he said. "It's not what you think. It's for therapy, a post-nuptial agreement, proof that I'm willing to rebuild trust, legally, emotionally, whatever it takes." I stared at him. "You think paperwork is going to fix this?" He shook his head. "No, but it's a start." I didn't open the envelope. I just set it on the counter and walked past him. Later that night, I found him in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked like a man who'd lost everything, and maybe he had. "I know I can't take it back," he said, "but I'd rather spend my whole life trying to make it right than give up now." And that was the moment I realized something else. Forgiveness isn't a single choice. It's a process, 1,000 tiny decisions, to stay or to go, to speak or stay silent, to hold on or to let go. I wasn't ready to decide yet. But I was ready to stop letting the pain control me. That night, I moved back into our bedroom. Not because I'd forgiven him, but because I was reclaiming my space and maybe, piece by piece, myself. Part 4. The night I finally asked why. I couldn't sleep. Even after moving back into our bedroom, the silence between James and me stretched like a canyon. We shared a bed, but not warmth. We exchanged words, but not truths. Every night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed the signs, wondering if maybe I hadn't wanted to see them. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I finally whispered, "Why her?" The question had lived inside me for weeks, but I'd never let it out. Not because I didn't want the answer, but because I was terrified of it. Because what if the answer was that she was everything I wasn't? James shifted beside me. I heard the breath catch in his throat. "I don't know," he said after a moment. "It wasn't her." "Not really. It could have been anyone." That answer hurt more than I expected. Not because he didn't love her, but because it made her feel like a symptom of a deeper disease. I felt invisible. He continued. "You were always so busy, work, the projects, the planning. You were amazing, but somewhere along the way, I started feeling like a roommate, or a prop in the background of your success. You could have told me," I said, my voice trembling. "I would have listened." "I didn't know how," he admitted, "and I didn't want to sound weak. So instead of talking to you, I took the coward's way out." It was the first time he'd said it like that, without deflecting, without justifying, and though it didn't heal anything, it opened a door between us that had long been locked. We stayed quiet for a long time after that, but this silence was different. It wasn't bitter or defensive. It was the silence of two people standing in the rubble, finally seeing it for what it was. The next morning, I called my sister. She and I had always been close, closer than most, but during all of this, I'd pushed her away, not out of anger, but shame. I didn't want her to see me broken. When I heard her voice, something in me cracked. "I'm not okay," I said. She didn't respond right away. Then, "Do you want me to come over?" And I did, more than anything. She arrived that afternoon with takeout, a bottle of wine, and a look in her eyes that said, "You don't have to be strong today." We sat on the floor of the living room, plates on our laps, surrounded by pillows and messy blankets. "I wanted to hate him," she said, "but I don't. I don't understand him. I don't think he understands himself." She nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Some days I want to run, other days I want to stay and see if we can fix this." She looked at me seriously. "And what about you? Not just the marriage, you. What do you need?" I hadn't thought about that. 4 weeks. I'd been trying to either punish James or save us. I hadn't considered the third option, healing myself. That night, I asked James if he'd be willing to do something with me, a marriage counseling retreat. Not therapy in a cold office, but a weekend away, something immersive, a reset. He looked surprised. "You want to work on this?" "I want to figure out if there's anything worth working on." He agreed, almost too quickly. I think he was relieved, maybe even scared of what it would mean if I stopped trying. The retreat was scheduled for the following weekend, just 2 days, a cabin in the woods, guided sessions, group work, and, ironically, no phones. I packed a small bag, not because I was optimistic, but because I wanted answers. I needed to know if this man, the one who had shattered me, was still the one I could rebuild anything with. The first night at the retreat was awkward. The room was filled with couples who looked just like us, broken smiles, forced hands held together like cracked porcelain. We were paired with a counselor named Teresa. She was in her 60s, soft-spoken, with eyes that saw everything. In our first private session, she asked us one question. "What was the last moment you truly saw each other?" James and I looked at each other. He said, "Our anniversary, 2 years ago, the beach trip." I said, "The night we got the offer on our first house." We both smiled faintly, and for the first time in weeks, it felt real. Teresa nodded. "That's where we start, not from the betrayal, from the last place love lived without fear." Over the next day, we unpacked everything, the resentment, the pressure, the way we stopped communicating when things got too hard. I saw James cry for the first time in years, not just for what he did, but for the man he had become, the one he no longer recognized. I cried too. And somewhere in that mess of pain and truth, we found something small and flickering. Hope. Not a promise, not forgiveness, but a beginning. Part 5. Love doesn't look like this. We came back from the retreat with more questions than answers. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd started to stitch things back together. But healing isn't linear. It's not a straight road, and I learned quickly that love, once bruised like ours, doesn't come back clean. It limps, it hesitates, it hides in shadows and waits to see if it's still safe to breathe. James was trying. I could see it in the little things. He started making coffee again in the mornings, just the way I liked it. 2 sugars and oat milk. He put his phone face up on the table, left it charging in the living room at night. He even started holding my hand again while we walked the dog. But beneath those gestures was something hollow. Because love doesn't look like fear. And every time he touched me, there was a tremor of guilt behind it, like he was begging me not to recoil. And sometimes, I did. Not because I didn't want to be close, but because I couldn't forget. I couldn't forget the image of him laughing at something someone else said, holding her face like he used to hold mine, saying things I'd never hear. That night in the kitchen, I finally broke. He was chopping vegetables, I was stirring soup. We hadn't spoken much all day, just the occasional check-in. Then I saw the way he smiled at a text notification on his phone. It was nothing, really, a harmless group chat, but something inside me cracked open. "Did you laugh like that with her?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He froze. The knife in his hand hovered above the cutting board. "What? Did you smile at her that way? Did you make jokes in the kitchen? Did she know things about you that I didn't anymore?" He put the knife down and turned to me. His eyes were weary. "Emily, I've told you everything." "No." You've told me what you think I want to hear, but that's not the same as the truth. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. I don't know what else to say. Then say nothing, I snapped, tears welling up, because I'm so tired of trying to pull the truth out of you like teeth. He looked at me for a long time. Do you want me to leave? And for a moment, I didn't know. That night, I sat alone in the backyard. The air was cold, but it helped numb the noise in my head. I watched the stars through blurry eyes and remembered the first time James brought me flowers. Not roses or tulips, but wildflowers, messy, beautiful, chaotic. He said they reminded him of me. What changed? Was it me? Did I stop being soft? Did I become too busy, too distant, too focused on everything except us? Or was this always in him, this ability to compartmentalize his heart, to split himself between loyalty and desire? I didn't know anymore, and I was starting to wonder if trying to understand him was making me lose myself. The next day, I packed a bag. Just for a few days, I needed space, I needed silence, I needed a place where every corner didn't scream his name. I called my sister and asked if I could stay in her guest room. She didn't ask questions, just said yes. James didn't fight me when I told him. He looked like he wanted to, but something in his posture sagged like a man surrendering to gravity. Will you come back? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly, but I have to figure out if I want to. He nodded, lips pressed into a tight line. Okay. My sister's apartment was tiny but warm. She gave me space without smothering me. Left notes on the fridge with things like, you don't have to be okay today, or your worth is not tied to someone else's blindness. I cried the first night, not out of pain, but relief. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. I started journaling. At first, it was just angry scrawls, words like betrayal, shame, how could you? But slowly, they softened into questions. What do you need? What do you want your life to look like now? If he was gone, would you grieve the man, or the memory of who he used to be? I didn't have the answers yet, but I was finally asking the right questions. On the third night, James texted. I miss you. I'm not giving up, but I'll give you space. I just want you to be okay, whatever that looks like. It was the kindest thing he'd said in weeks. And for once, it didn't feel manipulative. But I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed to learn how to exist without defining myself through him, through the marriage, through the pain. 3 days turned into a week. And in that week, I did things I hadn't done in months. I took long walks. I cooked for myself. I bought a sketchbook and started drawing again. It wasn't good, but it was mine. And somewhere between the silence and the healing, I realized something terrifying. I might be okay on my own. I might even be better. Part 6. When silence speaks louder than apologies. It's strange how quiet can be louder than any argument. After a week apart, the house I used to call home no longer felt like it belonged to me. I stood at the doorstep on a rainy Friday afternoon, suitcase in one hand, keys in the other. I hadn't told James the first was coming back, not permanently, not even for long. I just needed to see it, to stand inside the life we had built, and decide if it was still worth saving. The moment I stepped inside, everything smelled like him, cedarwood and clean laundry. My throat tightened, 1,000 memories clung to the walls, like ghosts watching silently from the corners. He wasn't home yet. I was glad. I didn't want words. I didn't want awkward hugs or polite questions. I just wanted a moment to breathe. I dropped my bag by the staircase and wandered through each room slowly, like a tourist in my own life. The living room couch still had the throw blanket I used to curl under every night while we watched true crime documentaries. The kitchen still had the mismatched mugs I insisted we keep from college. Even the note I left on the fridge weeks ago, "Don't forget to pick up oat milk," was still there. It was as if the house had held its breath, waiting for me. But I had changed. I didn't realize how much until I walked into our bedroom. The bed was made, something James never used to do before all this. There were fresh lilies in a vase on my nightstand, my favorite, and on the dresser, a small envelope with my name in his handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Emily. I don't know what to say anymore. Maybe that's what's broken between us, not just trust, but language. I say I'm sorry, and you hear I'm guilty. I say I love you. And you hear I loved her too. I want to fix this, but I don't know how to reach you without reopening the wound. So I'll wait. For as long as you need. And if one day you decide we can't come back from this, I'll still be grateful I got to call you mine. Even if only for a while. James. I read it twice. Then again. And each time, it hit me differently. Not because it made me forgive him, but because, for the first time, it felt honest. Like he finally understood that love isn't about fixing what you broke. It's about owning it. He came home 2 hours later. I was sitting in the living room, lights off, sipping tea I made more out of habit than comfort. He froze when he saw me, like someone afraid to believe in miracles. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey." He took a few steps forward. "Didn't expect you." "I didn't either." He nodded and stood there awkwardly, like he didn't know where to put his hands, his emotions, or his guilt. "I'm not here to move back in," I said. "I just needed to see if this place still felt like home." He swallowed. "And?" I looked around. "It feels like a museum," I admitted, "like it's waiting for people who aren't us anymore." He blinked hard. "Once. Yeah." Silence fell again. But it wasn't the hostile kind, it was reflective. Like both of us were flipping through old memories we weren't sure we had the right to keep. "I read your note," I said after a while. "Okay." "It was the first time I believed you meant it." He nodded. Slowly. "I did. I do." I set the mug down. "James, I don't hate you. I hate what you did. I hate what it turned me into. Paranoid. Angry. Small. I don't like who I became in this house. I don't like who I became either." "Then maybe we both need time to learn who we are now." He walked to the bookshelf and picked up a photo of us on our wedding day. We looked so young, so stupidly sure. "I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice breaking. "I know, that's the hardest part." That night, I stayed in the guest room. Not because I didn't trust myself, but because I needed a boundary. I needed to know I could be near him without losing myself in the past. We didn't talk much, just sat on opposite ends of the couch, watching a rerun of some show we used to love. Occasionally, our eyes met, but we didn't touch, we didn't try to fix it. And weirdly, that restraint felt more intimate than any hug could have. The next morning, I told him I was leaving again. "I need more time," I said. He didn't argue, didn't beg. Just nodded. "Take what you need, I'll be here." And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I believed him. I believed he'd wait, not to pressure me, not to control me, but because he finally understood that love, real love, doesn't rush the healing. It sits in the dark with you. And waits for the dawn. Part 7, The Weight of a Second Chance. Time doesn't heal everything. That's what no one tells you. People like to wrap grief in neat little sayings. Time heals. This too shall pass. You'll be stronger after. But some wounds don't close. They scab, scar, fester, and sometimes, they reopen when you least expect it. 3 weeks passed after I left the house again. I stayed with my sister Rachel, who, thank God, had been a rock throughout all this. She never judged James out loud, though I could see the disdain in her eyes whenever I mentioned his name. She wanted me to hate him. I think part of me did too. But another part, the part that remembered Sunday mornings in bed, whispered dreams of starting a family, nights spent building IKEA furniture with music playing and wine glasses clinking, that part wasn't ready to burn everything down. It's easier to hate someone when there's nothing left to love. But I still loved him. And that made every breath complicated. It was a Saturday morning when my phone buzzed. "James, I signed us up for a counseling session, just in case you ever want to try." I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't pushy, wasn't a guilt trip, just an invitation. That afternoon, I sat by the window, rain softly tapping the glass, and made a list. 2 columns, reasons to try and reasons to walk away. The walk away list filled faster. He lied. He broke our vows. I can't trust him. I feel humiliated. What if he does it again? Then, slowly, painfully, I began the other column. He told the truth eventually. He's trying. We had something worth fighting for. I still love him. That last one sat like a stone on my chest. When I agreed to counseling, it wasn't about forgiveness. It was about understanding. I needed to know how we got here. I needed someone impartial to sit between us and untangle the knots we'd made of each other. Our therapist, Monica, was calm and direct. The kind of woman who doesn't flinch when people cry, yell, or break. In our first session, she asked us not to talk about the affair. "I want to know who you were before it happened," she said, "because that version of you matters too." James looked at me, and I looked at him, and we both realized we'd forgotten. Forgotten how to laugh together, how to look without suspicion, how to speak without measuring every word. So we started small. She asked about our first date. He told her how I spilled red wine on his shirt trying to flirt. I told her how he panicked and tried to clean it with Sprite and ended up with a sticky mess and purple stains. We laughed, honestly laughed, for the first time in months. Then she asked about the moment we knew we were in love. James answered without hesitation. She was sick, like fever, shivering, miserable, and she still tried to cook dinner for my birthday. Burned half of it, couldn't taste anything, and cried in the kitchen. But she did it anyway. That's when I knew. I stared at him, stunned. I hadn't remembered that night in years. Then it was my turn. When his mom died, he didn't cry at the funeral. I said, he was just quiet. Everyone kept saying how strong he was. But that night, he curled into me and sobbed for an hour. I didn't say anything. I just held him. That was the moment I realized love isn't loud. It's presence. Monica smiled gently. Now let's talk about what broke that presence. Over the next weeks, we peeled back everything. The slow disconnection. How I buried myself in work. How he felt unseen. How he never communicated that loneliness until it found another outlet. It didn't excuse what he did, but it gave it context. And context isn't forgiveness, but it is understanding. One night, after a session that left us both raw and drained, he walked me to my car. The air was cold, but not unfriendly. "Can I hug you?" he asked. It shouldn't have made my heart skip, but it did. I nodded. He wrapped his arms around me, and for a moment, I melted into what was familiar. My head on his shoulder, his hand gently on my back. "I miss this," he whispered. "I miss what this used to be." We stood there, suspended between past and future. Then came the night of the truth I hadn't wanted. We were in session, discussing boundaries. I asked Monica if rebuilding trust meant full transparency going forward, no secrets, no omissions. She nodded. James looked uncomfortable. "Is there something you haven't told me?" I asked. Silence. He shifted in his chair. "I didn't sleep with her more than once," he said, "but we kissed a few times before that, before the night you found out." I stared at him. My blood ran cold. "You told me it happened once. I didn't want to make it worse. You lied again. I didn't want to lose you completely." And in that moment, I felt like a fool all over again. Not because of what he did, but because I dared to believe he'd told me everything. That night, I didn't go home. I walked for miles through the city, past strangers, streetlights, restaurants we used to love. By the time I reached Rachel's apartment, my feet ached and my soul felt hollow. I sat on her couch, knees pulled to my chest, and cried like I hadn't since the beginning. Because now I didn't know what was worse. The betrayal I had learned to live with, or the realization that the healing was built on half-truths. Part 8, the end, or the beginning. The truth has a way of leaving bruises where no one can see them. I had come so far. I'd opened myself to healing, to honesty, to the possibility, no matter how fragile, of rebuilding. But all it took was one hidden truth, one cowardly omission, to tear open every scar I'd tried to stitch back together. James had kissed her multiple times, long before the night I caught them. That wasn't a slip. That was a pattern, a decision, again and again. And now, all I could see was a man who kept choosing wrong until it was convenient to admit it. I didn't call him that night, or the next. Days passed. He texted, he called, he even emailed, but I didn't respond, because sometimes silence is the only language pain understands. Rachel sat beside me on her couch, watching me stare into space. "You don't owe him anything," she said. I nodded. But inside, I wasn't sure that was true. Because I owed myself peace. I owed myself clarity. And that meant facing him one final time. The next evening, I knocked on the door of what used to be our home. James opened it, eyes wide and exhausted. He hadn't shaved. There were bags under his eyes. The house behind him was quiet, dim. He stepped back silently, letting me in. We didn't sit. We didn't talk right away. I walked through the living room, fingers grazing the back of the couch where we used to curl up and watch documentaries, my eyes landing on the wall of photos we once curated with joy, our wedding, a beach trip, a blurry but beautiful selfie from the night we moved in. I need to say this, I finally said. Not for you. For me. James nodded, eyes brimming. You didn't just betray me when you slept with her, I began. You betrayed me when you let me believe I had the full story. When you stood in therapy and lied again. You looked me in the eyes, after everything, and still chose to protect yourself instead of telling me the truth. I was scared. I'm not here for another excuse, James. I'm here to end this chapter. He looked like I'd slapped him. I wanted to fight for us, he whispered. You wanted forgiveness without honesty. That's not love, that's manipulation wrapped in guilt. He flinched, and I felt something crumble in my chest. Not pity, not revenge, just closure. I deserve someone who doesn't hesitate to tell me the truth, who doesn't take my heart for granted, who understands that love is not just comfort and chemistry, it's character. I pulled the ring from my pocket, the one I hadn't worn since that first night I left, and placed it on the entry table. I'm choosing myself, I said, not because I don't love you, but because I finally love me more. Tears ran down his face, real ones, maybe the first honest thing I'd seen in a long time. He reached out, but I stepped back. No more, James, this is goodbye. The night air hit me like a wave when I stepped outside, cold, but sharp, awakening. I didn't cry, I didn't look back. I walked away from the house, the lies, the memories, and toward something else. Something uncertain, something terrifying. But also, something mine. Epilogue. A year later, I live in a small apartment overlooking the river. I joined a writers group. I laugh more easily. I trust myself again. Sometimes, I think about him. I wonder if he learned, if he grew. But I don't wonder if I made the right decision. I know I did. Because I stopped waiting to be chosen. And chose myself instead.